Saints are trying to get over the hump. They are trying to win a world championship. We know that window is closing and how close they've been each of the last 3 years. But it's time. It's time for the Saints to get over the hump, and there are small tweaks that hopefully they've made that are ultimately going to help the Saints do just that, to get over the hump and to win a world championship before Drew Brees hangs him up. One of those is adding Janoris Jenkins, which they did late in the year last year, and ultimately decided that they were going to part ways with Eli Apple this year because of the addition of Janoris Jenkins and what that means for the New Orleans Saints and that secondary. I want to talk about Janoris Jenkins because I have some thoughts on this. Dennis Allen met with the media via teleconference and did explain kind of how they plan on using Janoris Jenkins this year in his first full season with New Orleans.
Certainly, I think the more opportunity that we have to be around him and to evaluate him, the easier it is for us to really determine all the things that he really does well and try to put him in those positions as much as we can. Certainly, we feel like he's got really good man coverage talent. And so when you do have corners of that nature with he and Marshawn both, it does lend the ability to play maybe a little bit more man-to-man. And so that'll be something that as we go through training camp and get through some of these preseason games, certainly we'll utilize that time to evaluate, not only Janoris, but everybody on our defensive football team to find out the things that we can really do well. And those will be the things that we want to stick to as our bread and butter throughout the season.
He dropped a look in the middle. After the look, I didn't hear anything else. It's like a trigger in my brain when I hear Loomis or Peyton or Breeze or Allen or any of them. Look or listen. They all use them interchangeably. But what you did hear Dennis Allen say there is, look, they're going to play a lot of man, and you're going to have Lattimore on one side, you're going to have Janoris Jenkins on the other side. My big question, and it's not that was even a question, right? We knew whenever they paid Janoris Jenkins this money that he was going to be the man cover corner on the outside opposite of Marshawn Lattimore. Now you have, ideally, if they're both playing at an elite level, one of the best cornerback tandems, duos in the NFL. And that's what you need in this division. I'm not sold Carolina is going to do a whole lot of anything offensively this year. No disrespect to Teddy Bridgewater. I just don't think that they're ready to be there. They're in a rebuild. But when I look at Atlanta, and you're talking about big receivers like Julio Jones, and of course in Tampa, where you've got both Evans and Godwin, yeah, man, like you better have a two-headed monster on the outside that can handle that and a really talented guy in the slot, which obviously they do with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So I really love them committing to Janoris Jenkins. My question is, can 31-year-old Janoris Jenkins match the incredible 2016 that he had? Janoris Jenkins in 2016 made a Pro Bowl. He was second-team All-Pro. He had the best year of his career. It was his first season in New York. Only had 3 picks, but had 18 passes defended. Pro Football Focus graded him out at 88, and only 50% of the passes thrown his way were completed. So he was stellar in year 1 in New York. And he was really good after that. In 2017, he only played 9 games. He was suspended for part of the season, had an ankle injury, cost him the rest of the year. And then in 2018, had another really good year. He made 70 tackles, defended 15 passes, only a couple of picks. But again, good in coverage again on what ended up being a pretty bad team. And then in 2019, it fell apart. He had the sort of inappropriate tweet. The Giants decided just to cut him, do away with him. The Saints scooped him up, and the Giants' loss is the Saints' gain. But the key is, I think, so many times you see this, not only in the NFL, but so many times in all sports. You see instances where a change of scenery does an athlete or a coach or a GM like an amazing amount of good. Like sometimes it just a fresh start helps. I think this happened a couple of years ago with Nick Fairley, where He'd gotten drafted by Detroit. There were high expectations, and they had Ndamukong Suh, and he kind of got overshadowed. And he went to the Rams, and they were so deep with Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers that he was just caught in the Washington rotation. He comes to New Orleans, and finally it was like, hey, man, listen, just be what you were at Auburn. Pin your ears back and go kill the quarterback. And he had a phenomenal year with the Saints. Jenkins, I think, is a guy that's benefited from a change of scenery. It happened whenever he left the Rams and went to the Giants. And I hope anyway, that the same is going to be true now, and that for the first time in his career, he can be sort of invigorated by the fact that he's playing for a contender. And he's going to be challenged opposite Lattimore. If teams don't want to throw at Lattimore, they're going to throw at Jenkins. And maybe this is a year where that guy can replicate what he did 4 years ago in 2016 or come close to it and have that type of season. I don't think he needs to be grade out an 88 on Pro Football Focus. But if he can be kind of what he was in terms of completion percentage against him, now all of a sudden if you're the Saints defense and you're Dennis Allen, you heard what he said, like, if we can play more man, that allows you to get more creative at the line of scrimmage to go blitz, the passer and put pressure on the passer. And I think that's really what they're expecting or hoping to do. One more here from Dennis Allen on not only Jenkins, but the importance of having him late last season, where he only played in 3 games, made 2 starts. It was a small sample, but how important that was.
Well, look, certainly there's an overall body of work that you utilize to try to form opinions about what a guy can do or can't do. But there's nothing like the experience of having a guy in your building. And I can tell you just from my experience with him in that brief period of time, I felt like he was a real pro. I felt like he came to work every day with the intention of getting better. And I think he was a great addition to our football team. And I'm certainly excited about working with him again this season.
Dennis Allen, again, on a teleconference with New Orleans media members. The other thing that stands out is Dennis Allen talking about what a real pro Janoris Jenkins was. And let's not forget, this is a guy that his time at Florida came to an abrupt end. He had to go to the FCS level to finish his career because he got kicked off the team at Florida. He obviously was traded and then was waived by the Giants because of off-the-field stuff. I mean, he had been suspended in 2017. Like, he's had some of those issues, and that reputation kind of follows. But the other side of it is you've got this sample where he's been an incredible pro on the field, and then you've got a guy like Dennis Allen saying he's been a consummate pro. That's what points me down the road of thinking, like, so much of it for so many guys sometimes is circumstantial. It's situational. Like, do you jive with a coach, with your teammates, the city? Like, do some guys need to be motivated by if they're playing on competitive teams or franchises? Like, a lot of that matters. And when you come to New Orleans, especially with the way that locker room is right now, as tight as it is, as close-knit as it is, as many leaders as there are on that team, I think it's easy for guys to fall in line and not act out. And it's different when you're playing on a young team that's winning 4 games a year and when you're playing on a veteran team that's got an ambition of winning a Super Bowl. All right, a couple more from Dennis Allen. Speaking of the secondary, 6, Musso, if you would. He was asked, Dennis Allen was, about the possibility of using a 3 safety look, which makes a lot of sense, of course, with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the team and obviously bringing back Malcolm Jenkins in place of Von Bell.
Yeah, look, I thought a lot about it. When you look defensively, at least for us, and I would say this is a trend throughout our league, we played, 70-something%, I don't know the exact number, but 70-something% of our snaps were played in a sub-defense with 5 defensive backs on the field. Now, whether that's 3 safeties and 2 corners or whether that's 3 corners and 2 safeties, certainly that remains to be seen. I think when you look at some of the depth that we do have at the safety position, I think that bodes well for us. And we've got some guys that have some flexibility in terms of what they can do. Guys like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, guys like P.J. Williams that have the ability to play in the slot on wide receivers, as well as play and succeed at a traditional safety position. So certainly we feel good about some of the depth that we have. And look, part of this whole process is going to be getting through training camp and getting through some of these preseason games, finding out exactly who we have and what we have. And then our job will be, to utilize those players the best we can.
Not only getting through preseason games to find out what you have, but also healthy. Remember, a year ago, the Saints had added P-Rob back, thinking he was going to be that guy. He gets injured, and ultimately they had to go a different direction. You've got P-Rob back. A lot of people recoil when they hear the name P.J. Williams, but I like the idea of having P.J. Williams as my backup nickel or potentially dime back. Like, I'm good with that P.J. Williams. What I'm not good with is P.J. Williams as my starter opposite Marshawn Lattimore on an island. I don't like that idea. I use this example often, but Charles Hannegriff has used this one, or he used it years ago. You remember Blake Gill, who played baseball at LSU? If you don't, no worries, but it was in the Smoke era. Blake Gill playing first base and batting seventh was a pretty good option. Blake Gill playing short and batting third wasn't. And there was a reason one LSU team went to Omaha and the other didn't. Like, what are you asking these guys to do? I'm okay with P.J. Williams being a backup cornerback who's got some versatility, who could play in some nickel and dime packages. I'm not good with P.J. Williams existing on an island. I am okay with Jackrabbit doing that. I like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I loved him let me rephrase. I hated him at Florida because he was so good and LSU had to play him every year. But when the Saints drafted him, I did backflips because I love that dude's versatility. I think he is an awesome defensive back that can cover the slot, that can play a traditional safety role, and that's a super pick and a guy that's going to play a long time and a lot of meaningful snaps for the Saints. I like this secondary a lot, the way it's come together. I like adding Malcolm Jenkins back to the roster as well. Man, I'm pretty excited. I think you can hear it from Dennis Allen that he is as well. For whatever the shortcomings may be, I remind you, the playoff exits have been notorious, but there's no team in the NFL over the last 3 years that's won more games than the New Orleans Saints. 11-5, 13-3, 13-3. They won 37 games over the last 3 years. That's more than any other team in the NFL. And oh, by the way, they added Dietrich Nichols, of whom I am a gigantic fan. I've known him for a long time, known of him for a lot of years. Stop shaking your head. I'm a huge Dietrich Nichols fan. That's my guy. If they had a fan club, president of it. Super big. I am a super big Dietrich Nichols guy.